2003, I arrived to Toronto. I started my fellowship, and Maureen, which was a respiratory therapist, she changed my life. She asked me in Canadian, would you like to intubate? And I said, yes, sure. She asked, would you like morphine or fentanyl? And I said, I don't need anything. It's a short, simple procedure. Maureen told me, you're a cruel person. Actually, no Canadian will tell you that you're a cruel person. She said, years later, we agreed about it, that it's cruel to intubate without sedation. But I heard that I was a cruel person. I was extremely offended. I went into the PubMed, which was relatively new at that time, and I inserted 3 words, pain and preterm infants. And there were already hundreds of papers about it, which I completed a full residency without knowing anything about it. So this is Maureen with her life-changing event. On the PubMed were many papers of this person, Sunny Anand, which became my mentor. Sunny, in opposed to me, so he many oppositions, but he was a Rhodes Scholar that came from India to Oxford. And he noticed at the beginning of the 90s that preterm babies are coming from the OR, from ductus ligation, and are dying. And in opposed to me and many of us, he did the thing. He went to the OR to see what is going on. He didn't accept his bosses telling him that it's a short, simple procedure. And he noticed that babies at that time were going through surgeries with muscle relaxation without analgesia or sedation. And he did the first study, which was a randomized study in which some got sedation and analgesia and the other not. And not surprisingly, those that were treated were doing much better. So Sunny became my mentor, and I came back to Israel in 2006, passionate in changing culture in the NICUs and promoting pain. But soon enough, it was clear that it's not only about pain, it's also about stress. And I needed for my dictionary more words, so I started with the NIDCAP program, and I became a NIDCAP professional guided by Nick Kahneman, which was my mentor. I wanted to follow the kids after their discharge, so I initiated my follow-up clinic in which I've seen more than 600 babies, all of them examined by me. I became professional in Griffith mental developmental scales, and this is my clinic. But again, I realized that many things are happening and I do not have the right words to describe, to understand. So I started learning Psychiatry of Infancy by Miri Keren, which was the previous president of the International World of Infant Health Psychiatry, and continued then to psychotherapy. So my dictionary, this is my dictionary, the one that I'm going to present to you. And this is my family, and I think everyone is happy with me becoming a more sensitive person with a wider dictionary. Yeah. So these are the brains of our preterm infants, actually this one. I once heard someone describing it as a boiled egg, so it's extremely smooth. Actually, not completely. Babies, at least we know today that there are some imprinting already in utero. However, these preterm babies, when are coming to our care in the NICU, they are experiences all the life events that we supplement to them, and by the time that they are going home, they have a completely different brains. And these brains are at a critical time point in which neurons has already completed their migration, and axons are growing and synapses are being created. They are being created secondary to experiences, good experiences, bad experiences, or no experiences. And this is the time point in which motor and sensory neuronal circuits are being created. And Heidi Alls, I once heard her saying, we cannot put the brain on hold, as every experience matters. It affects a developing brain. So Dr. Kuhn already spoke about critical and sensitive periods in life. I want to go a little bit deeper into it. So we know that babies that are born with congenital cataract, if the cataract will not be corrected within the first 6 weeks of life, these babies will not learn to see. Even though all the anatomical parts are there, if there is no experiences, if there is no stimuli, then the visual cortex will become atrophic and these babies will stay blind. We know that there are sensitive periods in life, not only for vision or for hearing, but also for speech and language development, for emotional development, and for cognitive development. And you can see here that most of these things are happening within the first 2 years of life. Those synapses are being created about 1,000 synapses per second in the first 2 years of life. So what we do at this period of time cannot be replaced. It's like, it has been said here before, it's like building a house. You need a good foundation. If the foundation is not good and strong enough, then it takes a lot to do corrections. And again, from the study about the Romanian orphanages, there were many orphanages, only small number of caregivers, a lot of neglect and abuse. And the group from Harvard, which was doing studies on these children and still continuing to follow them, has shown that there is major differences between those that were never hospitalized. We can see here EEG, and more red is better compared to the children that were never hospitalized, never institutionalized. So they had a program in which these babies were moved into foster care. And you can see here, those that moved to foster care before the age of 2 years, their brains look much similar to those that were never institutionalized. Those that were moved after the age of 2 years could not be recovered. And this is not only in EEG, this is also in terms of emotional development, ADHD, learning capacities, empathy, etc. So if we're talking about sensitive periods in life, it's not only language or vision, it's also emotional development. And the quality of social-emotional development and skills strive from the interaction with a caregiver. And we know that a child, a baby, needs a sensitive parent beside him, one which will react and respond in a timely, appropriate manner to the child cues, that those responses will be predictable, they will repeat themselves, and that there will be an emotional involvement. However, the kids in our NICUs oftentimes get parents who cannot give them those kind of things. So early life experiences, this was also today in some versions, in the womb are very different from those early life experiences. The noises are maybe mom's voice, heart rate, bowel movements. There is cyclicity of day and night. Mom is resting at night, moving in the morning. There are hormonal cycling, which also introduce the baby into the normal cyclicity of life. However, here in the NICU, there is a big chaos. And in the NICU, there is a lot of pain, a lot of stress, and separation. So if we're talking about early life experiences and shaping our brain, these are the experiences in the NICU. And this was also shown before, and it's a nice picture or example of how pain affects brain. We know now that a preterm infant is exposed to about 500 stressful or painful procedures during his stay in the NICU. And here we can see babies that were not exposed to pain, moderate amount of pain, and a lot of pain. And we are looking at brain connectivity, which is an indirect measure of brain function. And for us, oftentimes, these are simple procedures, normal procedures, daily procedures, but not for the patient that lies there under our care. I hope that the video will come up. Probably it's too heavy. Okay, then we cannot see it, but was it me? We tried it in the morning, it was functioning. Okay, never mind, we'll skip it. It's just a video showing our team in the previous hospital where I was working, inserting a central line, umbilical vein line in a baby, and we can see how, maybe we can do it from here. Okay, I'll do it. Never mind, I'll skip it. So procedures that for us are completely daily life routine for those babies are extremely stressful. And I use this video to especially when I teach students or residents or nurses.
סימני כאב בפג.
I ask them, how come that we're doing it and we didn't notice that the baby is suffering? And does it mean now that he doesn't move, that there is no suffer any longer? And of course, that when we are stressed, we are all doing regression to our most primitive behaviors, so we cannot give empathy when we are in stress. When we want to succeed in a certain procedure, when we want to show that we are good enough, or when we do not know, haven't learned to see what is pain in a preterm baby. Can we go to the next one? And we were talking before about stress, different kind of stress. Positive stress, which is normal daily life stress, and it's associated with healthy brain. Tolerable stress, stress in a higher amplitude and in a higher intensity. However, if buffered by supporting relationship, by our peers, parents, friends, then it's still associated with healthy brain architecture, like for me, standing here, talking for you, in a language which is not my mother language. So this is tolerable stress, and if I overcome it and you are smiling and keep on being concentrated, then for me it gives me a sense of coping and mastery, and I'll do it again. Toxic stress is stress in a high intensity which repeated itself, and there is no buffering system. And in I don't agree with you and saying, believing or wanting to believe that there is positive stress in the NICU. I believe that there is no positive stress in the NICU. And I would like to give an example. So positive stress for a baby is having to go through a bathing or diaper change. We know that babies are crying because babies live in what is familiar or unfamiliar, familiar, unfamiliar. What is familiar is tolerable. They can cope, but what is unfamiliar, it's scaring, it's frightening. In psychology world, they are falling apart. We are falling apart. So after 6 weeks, we know that there is habituation. The baby learns this situation, and this situation becomes part of normal life. And there is also one hand to care for this baby, and there is cue-based interaction, and the mother will know when the baby is doing or stretching its leg, it means that he's falling apart, so she will tuck him, talk to him, do something. So there is a dance in which both this dyad is learning to dance and no one is stepping on the foot of the others. However, in the NICU, I believe that there is only toxic stress or mainly toxic stress, especially if we move away the supportive system, which is the parents. In the NICU, there are, at least in my NICU, 60 different hands who are doing this diaper change, not to mention physicians, technicians, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. And we know that it's not a single event, but that it's more a cumulative associated damage so it's the cumulative experience that is toxic to the brain. We have shown in one study that among babies that were born at less than 32 weeks with normal brain ultrasounds, those that were intubated, the amount of stress and pain was associated with poor developmental outcome at the age of 12 months. So there was a sensitization by the intubation, by being intubated and being ventilated, and on top of it, the repeated exposure to stress and pain was damaging. And tomorrow we're going to have a lecture which I'm waiting for by Dieter Wolke, and he published many studies. One of them is about the Bavarian cohort of 250 babies that were born in Bavaria and were followed from birth until the age, even until now. And they looked at factors that predict cognitive outcome at the age of 20 years. And here we can see that the IQ of babies that are born at term probably will be at around 100 with a standard deviation of 15. However, those born at 26 weeks or 25 weeks, their mean IQ will be only 85 to 90, and at 23 weeks, it will be less than 85, so less than 1 standard deviation. Every IQ point matters. And they have shown that many factors are associated with IQ at the age of 20, like RDS, IVH, mechanical ventilation, nutrition, but also poor PIRI, poor parent-infant relationship index. And they have shown that parents that showed more self-efficacy, so were more confident in themselves, were staying with their children longer time in the NICU, showed more joy during the care of their children. These children gained up to 5 IQ points more. And the opposite side, those that were not self-efficacious or self-confident, lost 9 IQ points, a lot. So parents contribute to the resilience of their children, and we know it. And when I see a smiling mom, I know that we are in a good place. So responsive caregiving, once again, the importance of parents. These are not our parents in the NICU. They do not have their buffering system with them. They are, like you said, they are devastated, they are sad, they feel guilt, and oftentimes they show signs of depression and PTSD, and we know that it affects the partnership. So these are our parents, those that will tell them what to do, how to do, and when to do. We do not allow them oftentimes to become sensitive parents, to have an intuitive interaction with their children. And we know that sensitive parenting is the basis for developing of secure attachment. So do we support this buffering system? Do we support the parents who are the buffering system of the preterm infants in the NICU? And there are studies, many studies, I chose one, and here we can see preterm infants compared to term infants. And among the preterm infants, there is more likely to find interactions which are called controlling mother, compulsive, compliant infant, rather than a cooperative interaction. And this affects outcomes, and we can see higher rate of eating problems and higher rate of personal, social, or less developmental outcomes are less good in terms of personal social outcomes and speech and language development. And sorry for this slide, but it's this video, but it is an important one. Sorry that it's not in the right place. Hey, I'll try to do it on my own. Okay. Where is my petition? Okay. So this video came to me from a different country. It's not from Israel. Someone wanted me to assess the child. And we see a feeding interaction. I don't know who did it. I'm not judgmental. I don't know if it's mom or not, but it doesn't matter. The child is used to this kind of feeding. There are no voices here. There is no joy or play. There is no cue-based interaction. This is a task-oriented interaction in which a child has to be fed in order to grow, to gain weight, to be healthy. And it's hard to see, but as a director of the follow-up clinic, I saw many like this. And I used to ask parents, what are your concerns when they came to me for the first time? It was always feeding. It was always about growing. Okay, so how can we help parents become sensitive? I feel, or to simplicize the need cup for me is humanizing the preterm infant. The need cup for me is a dictionary into the preterm infant's behavior. And I use the need cup in order to help parents to see, feel, and think. I hope that these videos will work. So here we are going to see bathing, which is very common in the units. Okay, so again, not to be judgmental, in the unit where I worked, babies used to be bathed every day under the running water, between 5 to 7 when parents were not allowed to be there. So here we see a nurse who really tries because she allowed the parents to be there. We can see how task-oriented she is. And the mom is saying, oh, she's being refreshed. And the father is saying, help, help, I'm drowning, drowning. And the mother is asking why she's drowning. She's refreshed, she's enjoying. And what I want to say by this is that it's so easy to, maybe it's too harsh word, to demolish the parents' ability to see, to feel, to think. They will do what we are telling them. If we tell them this is the way to raise a baby, then this is the right way. Okay, and this is now in the new unit. She tells her, smile for me, smile for me. So this is mom. This is how it should be. A different tempo. Even if it's not perfect, nothing is perfect. They are learning to do it. And why is it so important? It is so important because the psychologists are using this. The wildflower will grow, doesn't matter what kind of, in what kind of, how much water we give them, how much light, and in which land they are growing. The orchids, which are preemies, they need a certain amount of water, a certain amount of light. They need us to be mindful on how we care for them. So now I'll go over to feeding. How much time do I have? Okay, so feeding the preterm infant, I use it as an assessment tool and as an opportunity for intervention and improving outcome. I believe that feeding, transitioning from oral feeding from nasogastric tube to oral feeding may be as stressful as other stressful procedures in the unit. And that repeated stressful experiences during feeding may establish altered pathway in the developing brain that guide the newborn away from feeding and lead to maladaptive behaviors and adversely affect the ability and desire to feed in the NICU, but also thereafter. And from the Facebook, I found this: 10 things I wish I would have known as a new dad. I wish I would have known that feeding our baby was going to be the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Those first feedings were a nightmare. We would feed our baby and watch the monitors the entire time. You would watch the monitors to make sure she was breathing and not choking, which is what would happen all of the time. So this is the parent's experience during the transitioning from nasogastric tube to oral feeding. So what is the transition feeding in a traditional NICU? In a traditional NICU, the feeding will be most probably delegated to the newest person in the unit, the new nurse, the student, because it's theoretically the most simple task that there is in the unit. Traditional feeding usually happens in a certain rhythm, so every 3 hours or every 2 hours with a pre-prescribed amount of volume of feeding, as if all the babies in the world need to be fed the same amount at the same time. And in order to succeed in this task, so it often entails maneuvers such as twisting the bottle or moving the nipple in and out to prod the infant. And it often discards the infant coordinated feeding behaviors and looks at behavioral cues, as the primary goal is to empty the bottle. It's hard for me to have examples of feeding because today in my unit it's rarely being seen, but I have to. So this is in the Healthy Baby Nursery.
Hello.
So by pressing the nipple in the upper gum, she creates a very, brings the baby to suck. So ignoring infant cues, especially during oral feeding, may promote stress by causing repeated physiologic dysregulation like desaturation, apnea, bradycardias, and by this creating negative feedback that creates a long-lasting aversion to feeding. So we said that this is a sensitive period in which motor and sensory pathways are being built. So this is the experiences that is happening at that time. And my last video. So I used to use this video as a good example for feeding. However, you can see that when the baby is pausing, the bottle is being moved. And now he's pausing again, and with his eyes, he's telling to his mom, "Thank you for being here, I'm happy, I'm here with you." But again, the bottle is being twisted to bring the baby again to sucking, and now he's really using very obvious cues, telling her, "Please stop." So the experience of learning to feed in the NICU may predispose preterm neonates to feeding problems that persist. And we know that among preterm infants, the rate of feeding problems are very high, much higher compared to children born at term. And this affects not only the feeding, but also emotional, behavioral, and physiological outcome. And we know that it's also often continues after infancy later on. And this is from the EpiCure, which looked at preterm infants at the age of 6 years and looked at feeding problems at this age. And even after controlling for cognitive, neuromotor, and behavioral difficulties, feeding problems were much common among the preterm infants. And we know that it also affects the dyads, so that studies on mother-child feeding interaction among children with eating disorders have shown that conflicts are greater in these dyads, and they are characterized by conflicts by maternal negative affect, low reciprocity, opposition, and negativism. So if we think about the mom perspective or the parent perspective, they are anxious. They want their child to grow because we applaud for every 100 grams. And we teach them that once the child will reach a certain weight, then he can go home. so it means that it's healthy. They were shown to have higher rate of stress, depression, anxiety, lower capacity for sensitive parenting, and are oftentimes intrusive in the interaction with their children. It's oftentimes the pressure to get it in the neonate, which is passed by us to the parents. So feeding and feeding problems remain worrisome for parents of former preterm neonates well into toddlerhood. And it's not getting better. In this study, we can see that there are higher maternal levels of negative affection, interaction and conflict, interactional conflict, and less dyadic reciprocity among preterm infants, and it increased between the age of 18 months to 24 months. So while in the term babies it decreased, in the preterm infants there was no change or even increase. So I was sitting in my unit and I was observing that it's quiet, that there will be a near darkness atmosphere. Here was my room and I was the observer. I was obsessive about it. I had to change my NICU mentality because I was the only person who did developmental care. And I studied the psychiatry of infancy, and I studied that feeding is the most important interaction between a mother and her child. I say mother, but I mean mother or father. And I learned that there is this word which is called intrusiveness. And I noticed that at 34 weeks, when our babies were allowed to start the battle, they were doing worse. Many of them went back to the intensive care part of the unit and required oxygen again. And I was able to observe what was going on. And I also heard in my follow-up clinic that feeding is the most challenging or stressful thing for parents of former preemies. And it was clear for me that we are doing something wrong. And when I was walking in this part of the unit, I could see the intrusiveness. I could see suddenly things that I haven't seen before, the way that these babies are being fed. So I had a mission now, a new mission, and it was to change the way we feed our babies. So to go from the aim of emptying the bottle to create another pleasurable and nourishing experience. To be, instead of being not interactive, so to have to feed the baby, so to go to support the babies to be fed, to use instead of fixed timing of feeding, to be more flexible, to allow each baby to eat when it wants and how much it wants, and to support it during the feeding, and to use pacing, and definitely to avoid intrusiveness. And this is my philosophy. I believe that there is only one person who came down from Mount Sinai who knew what is right and what is wrong. I think that we should be a little bit more modest and say, and try to avoid black or white, what should be done and what should not be done. I believe that we should be less preaching and less teaching and allow what's called active listening and guided participation. And definitely to be a good example, this is us, to serve as a good role model for the parents and the other part of the team. So I found out that there was already a Cochrane about cue-based feeding, but the method that I used is different, and it's based on all what I've said until now, and it was published in Frontier Pediatrics last year. And it was unique because I believed that the change should come from the parents. At this time, the nurses in our unit were not allowed to feel, think, to see, feel, or think. They were allowed to do what was told to them to do. And the unit was computerized already from 2006, so there was no flexibility. People were not allowed to think. And the only way to approach it was by going to the parents. So I believe that changing the culture from volume-driven to cue-based interaction, so one that supports parents through guided participation and active listening to appreciate infant cues during feeding will be associated with better outcome. So the aims were to decrease time to oral feeding and to shorten the length of stay, to decrease parental stress and anxiety during feeding, to decrease the conflict and improve the rate of positive interaction, and to decrease the rate of feeding difficulties later on. So physiological, emotional, the dyad, and the feeding. This study had two parts, one in the NICU, and the other one, these babies were continued to be seen in the Gonda Institute of Brain Studies. I'll go quick. We recruited only healthy preterm babies at less than 32 weeks. It was randomized, and we had two groups. The groups that was the intervention group, the intervention was guided by the parents. So the parents got theoretical section, which is like what I told you until now, just in a more gentle way. Then we had a talk about practical strategies on how to support their infants during the transition. So we talked about recognizing infant cues, signs of hunger, signs of satiety. We talked about intrusiveness and the importance of avoiding it. And we looked together at videos like I showed you before, and we discussed them, and I emphasized that there is no right or wrong. No one really knows when it's the time to offer or to stop, but it's a thing that we learn, and every family, every dyad has to learn it for its own. And then I introduced the parents to the medical format, which was something like this. Please feed the infant every 2 to 4 hours when it's awake and shows signs of hunger. If the infant may be fed a minimum and a maximum. So the minimum was 90 cc per kilo per day, and the maximum was 180 cc per kilo per day, and this is unique, a wide range. And then the other thing, if the minimum is not reached, please feed or supplement with the nasogastric tube up to 120. I didn't want the babies to be really, I wanted to allow them to become to feel hunger within 1 or 2 days. I had to avoid babies of losing weight, because if something like this would happen, the study would have to be closed immediately. So this, because of the unit atmosphere and the unit mentality, this was the tailoring. This is how I tailored the study for this group. And just to simplify, it was like this. Is your baby awake? Does it show signs of hunger? Is it stable? Does it suck well? And if yes, then please be aware of how you hold the baby. And there was no one way. We offered many ways. Each parent had to decide for each feeding what is the best for it. Avoid intrusiveness, use pacing, and disregard volume. We don't care about the volume. And this is how the babies later on, when they went to the follow-up clinic. So we had 32 infants in the responsive feeding interaction and 35 in the transitional one. And the groups were very similar to each other. And we noticed that there is a protocol deviation. So the baby started the intervention at 34 weeks. And we noticed, because we were one room, so not private rooms, so parents could see what's going on. And parents that had babies born at the same time noticed that one baby is doing better than the other. One is off the nasogastric tube, while the other one is still fighting on every battle. But it was not only the parents, also the nurses paid attention that there is a big difference. So after 3 years, the nurses came and said, we are now allowed to see, feel, and think. We don't want to be cruel to our babies anymore. We are not continuing to feed the babies in a traditional way. So please stop this study. So we had to stop the study and also take into account the contamination. So after a week, at 35 weeks, most of the contaminations occurred. And actually it was by parents or nurses who asked, are we allowed not to finish the last drop in the bottle? Are we allowed to let the baby to sleep another 30 minutes? So this was the contamination. No babies lost weight, and there were no hypoglycemia. We checked glucose twice. And the results, time to full oral feeding decreased in almost a week. Age also decreased, so we couldn't start at that time at less than 34 weeks. Now we do it at 33 weeks, or whenever the baby shows us that it's ready. Age at discharge was shortened in almost a week, and when we looked at a historical group, it was even more than a week. And initially, and this is very important, during the first transitional week, babies' weight gain is slower, but then they become hungry and they get back to their baseline, while the other ones are still fighting. Parents of preterm babies that were in the intervention group were more likely to stay and to feed their babies, and we said that it's important that parents will be there. And then someone asked me about how was the breastfeeding, what was the amount of breast milk feeding, not so good. And now we're planning an intervention in which we will do cue-based interaction, but also to improve the rate of direct breastfeeding. And our regression models shown that this was the main factor that was associated with time to oral feeding and time to discharge. So conclusion, parental guided responsive feeding is safe. There is a positive effect on the outcomes measures. It was associated with increased parental attendance. And once aware for the intervention, medical teams adopted it and generalized it to, on all NICU babies. So my take-home message is let's allow parents see, feel, and think. This approach should start from the beginning, from the first experience. Some people make mistake and first they say, let's first the baby will be full orally fed and then we will do the cue-based interaction. No, it should be from the first experience. And feeding is one example, bathing can be another one, and many other in the NICU. Let's allow NICU teams, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, physicians, see, feel, and think. Because once you empower them, once you allow them to step out of the box, they do so many nice things, and this is the new unit where I'm at now. It's Shamir Medical Center. Nothing was allowed, and within 8 months, everything is allowed. To poke on the mother, to bathe the baby, and I usually finish, it's not the last slide, but I usually finish my talks with the Sani Anand, the pain person, words. He published it in 2008. It was new to the world at that time. Paper that is called Love, Pain, and Intensive Care. And he dared to start this paper with a prayer from his guru, the Sai Baba, which says, no activity can give you the joy that service does. You should yearn for the chance to consult, comfort, encourage, heal. See yourself as another, feel his joy to be yours, his sorrow to be yours. So last pictures from my NICU, not like the German one. We are challenged, but we are trying. We have moved the breast pump to bedside. This was a very exciting change. We allow parents to relax. This was another change. Allowed a sister to come in and to see her new sister and the face. I didn't put it here, but many occupational therapists and physiotherapists, and actually they are doing these interactions. They are doing the main work. And we see the change very quickly, and this is Israel. So thank you.
What an awesome day so far. Would you agree? So cool. We are going to top off the end of the day with our next awesome speaker. You'll all be excited to hear Sharon Bonifazi. She's going to talk to us about what's hope got to do with it, the science behind the virtue. A little bit more about Sharon. She has been a neonatal nurse for 20 years. and has worked in a variety of roles, including bedside nursing, as an RN, transport nurse, and nurse manager. She has since spoken on Hope, Stories in the NICU at both the One Conference and the Science and Soul Conference in Belgium last year. Sharon feels that it is her calling to work with nurses and other professionals in the area of trauma-informed care and hopes to be an inspiration to the NICU professionals that inspire her on a daily basis. Please welcome Sharon Bonifazi.
How are you guys doing? You hanging in there? Anybody feeling overwhelmed with all this information? I know, I just love hearing everything that everybody's doing around the world, and I have a ton of questions for Dr. Kuhn later. Lots of questions, also for Dr. Morag. It's so exciting to see everybody here, and like Christy said, I talked last year about hope in the NICU, and it was more about stories. It was more testimonial on my journey to find hope in my life and in my work. And since then, I've wanted to find out more about it. So I started looking more into it because when I first started looking into it, I was like, I can't find anything, and I don't know why that was, because let me tell you, there's a lot. So I just want to invite you guys for a minute to just take a deep breath and kind of take in what you've learned today. And what we got kind of a shaky start this morning, a little late start, but gosh, there's been a lot of information, and sometimes that can get overwhelming. So what I'd like you to do now is put everything down, nothing in your hands, no cell phones, no pens. Put everything down and just take a minute. Sit back in your seat if you can, put both feet on the ground, okay? And I want you to just start taking some breaths as you relax. If you're comfortable with this, and I promise nobody's going to be spraying any water or making any loud noises, so trust me, if you've been in any of Mary's lectures, you may have experienced that. But we're not doing that today. But I would like you to close your eyes, sit back in your chair, and take one deep breath. And as you exhale your breath, I'd like you to start relaxing your neck muscles and your shoulders. And just relax. And I'll invite you to take another breath again, and relax your shoulders into your elbows, down to your wrists. Really, really relax and take in this moment of peace. Now what I'd like you to do is picture your working environment that you work in, wherever that may be, or where you study in. And take a look at what you're seeing and how you feel when you walk in there. Just kind of see how that feels to you. I'm going to ask you to change gears a little bit. And now I want you, in your mind's eye, to look and see what your very ideal unit would look like, what your ideal workplace would look like, and really, really get in touch with that situation. Are there smells there that you recognize? Is there any noise that you recognize? Furniture, lights, sounds. Who are the people that are around you? And really pay attention to the detail. And in this ideal situation where you're working, there's no limits. There's no budgetary restrictions. There's no staffing restrictions. There's nothing. It's your ideal unit. This is your dream. Okay, now I'd like you to take another deep breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I hope that we found some places that we are dreaming about working in. What I'd really love for you to do now, if you can, once you kind of come back to where we're at, is to think about what it was that you saw that was in your dream and pick one thing in your dream and write it down. I know, and I made you go to sleep. Now I'm making you work. It's just... These are my objectives. They're in the syllabus. I'm not going to read them for you because I think you guys can read yourself. Uh-oh, what happened here? Do not allow, is that showing on you? Oh, I want to recognize the content, yes. Okay. So we're going back to Dr. Erickson's theory. Do you guys remember this? I know there's some nursing students in here. And we've studied Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, right? I'm going to try to show you a video. And we're going to see just a little cartoon about this, okay? It's kind of fun, different way to look at it. This might get kind of loud at first.
All right, gentlemen. I hope you learned a bad lesson in scary today.
Boo.
Nemo! No!
Dad?
Nemo! You're about to swim in open water!
No, I wasn't.
You're about to swim in open water! If I hadn't shown up, I don't know. It's just a good thing I was here. If I hadn't shown up, I don't know. This does not concern you, kids. And you're lucky I don't tell your parents you were out there. And you're lucky I don't tell your parents you were out there. You know you can't swim well. No, it's not okay. You shouldn't be anywhere near here. No, it's not okay. You shouldn't be anywhere near here. We'll start school in a year or two.
No, Dad.
You know what? We'll start school in a year or two.
No, Dad.
Clearly you're not ready and you're not coming back until you are. You
Clearly
think you're not ready and you're not coming back until you just can't, Nemo. You think you can do these things, but you just can't, Nemo.
The really important ones are over here. I don't want to get too technical. Really important, but these are called core math. I don't want to get too technical. Each one came from a super important time in Riley's life. Each one
Like when she first scored a goal.
Important time in Riley's life.
So amazing. Like when she first scored a goal. That was
Fixing it for me up there. Sorry, you guys. Whoa. For a minute, I thought I was hearing things. What?
Don't give up! Make it close! Second
play.
Without a master, they had no purpose. They became aimless and depressed. If this went on much longer, they would surely perish.
Woody, he's been my pal for as long as I can remember. He's brave, like a cowboy should be, and kind and smart. But the thing that makes Woody special is he'll never give up on you. Ever. He'll be there for you, no matter what. You think you can take care of him for me? Okay then.
Silent movies. Thank you to the sound engineer for helping me with that. Can you get me back to my slides instead of me trying to mess it up? Thank you so much. Okay, so obviously you probably know from my title that we're going to be talking about stage 1, right? Trust versus mistrust. But I didn't think we could really just talk about that until we really look at, the stages that we're all going through, right? So does everybody remember this from school? So I'm going to ask a few questions, and I want to have some hands raised if you can. I know that none of us are in stage 1, and I know that none of us are probably in stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4 or stage 5, well, maybe stage 5. No, stage 6. Stage 6. Anybody in stage 6? Intimacy versus isolation. In your 20s, 30s, 20, 30-year-olds, raise your hand high, be proud. Okay. Those of us that are in our late 30s, 40s to 60, raise them high, raise them high. Generativity versus stagnation. And those of us that are over 65, integrity versus despair. Anyway, so as you can see, I've listed them out here. Every crisis that we go through, Erickson says we come out with a virtue, right? So if we go through this crisis successfully, we come out with a virtue. So hope, will, purpose, competence, fidelity, love, care, and wisdom. That's our goals for development according to Erik Erikson, and we're going to just talk about one of them. If I can advance my slide. Thank you. I thought I was hitting the side arrow, but okay. So the virtue in the first year of life, or goes to about 18 months of age, is hope, which comes out of the crisis of trust versus mistrust, okay? So this is during, an infant must have consistent caregiving to establish the sense of trust in the first year of life. And the most reliable caregiver in the infant's life is mom. I mean, we could have surrogates for that, but the mother or the primary caregiver that's taking care of the baby every day could be the foster mom, could be the adoptive mom, could be the father. Okay, but this is the person that's providing the reliable, consistent caregiving, and that's what our babies are looking for. So what's that got to do with anything that we do? Why am I talking about that? And so these are questions that I've asked myself and others have asked, and we're going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. Is hope real? Is it tangible, or is it just some pie-in-the-sky dream we have? Can it be measured? Where can I find some? That's always my question. Where can I get that? And how can I help spread that sense of hope to my patients, my coworkers, my family, my patients' families, and maybe even my boss? So the hope theory, hope has been studied for thousands and thousands of years. It really came out of, a lot of philosophers talk about hope, some good, some bad. But what I really got interested in was this movement that we saw starting in the 80s. Brian, you might be familiar with this, I'm not sure. That is called positive psychology. So what do we mean by positive psychology? Does anybody want to take a guess? When we're looking at psychiatry and psychology, what do we go to the psychologist for? What are we going there for? Problems to get fixed. Yes, that is what we're going there for. So psychologists and psychiatrists have for many, many years been studying disease, right? What's wrong with you? And so what happened out of positive psychology is that they were saying, what about the people who are doing really well? What's making them flourish? What's making them great people and fulfilled and successful and prosperous? Who are those people? And what they found out is that there's character traits that people have in common when we talk about flourishing. Am I doing okay, Brian? I'm asking the social scientist in the room. They found out that people that are flourishing have very common character traits. And some of those character traits we're actually talking about today, go figure. Compassion, courage, hope. We're talking about love, we're talking about faith. We've talked about a lot of this stuff all day today, positive family relationships. So there's certain people I have to mention because they're really in the literature all over the place, and I really urge you to read about this if you're at all interested. C.R. Snyder was the one that came up with the hope theory, and a really, really nice way to look at it. We're going to look at that today. Shane Lopez, Jan Hellman are all hope researchers that discovered that hope is indeed a science. It can be measured, it can be developed, it can be cultivated. So that's what I was interested in finding because I always want to find more. So they found out that both children and adults with an ACE score greater than 3 had a lower hope score. We're going to talk about the hope score. Can you pass those out for me? And Melinda is going to pass out a sample of the hope score that these scientists have studied. And they found out that people with an ACE score of greater than 3 had a lower overall hope score, okay? Don't get too worried about the hope score. You can do it later. I just wanted you to know what we're talking about, or you cannot do it at all. It's just nice information. So Melinda will pass those out for you. So I already told you that we're looking at people that are flourishing in positive psychology, and I looked it up in the dictionary, and what it says is to grow luxuriantly. I love that picture, and I was thinking about babies that are thriving, and they have these like big bellies and the cheeks that we all love, and I thought, gosh, that is thriving. That's what we like to see, right? It also could mean to achieve success of some kind if we're flourishing. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're successful in business, but that we are successful in our lives and that we're happy. So now, as Melinda's passing this out, you can refer to this, and I'm going to talk about the hope score. Melinda, when you get back around, I'll take a copy as well. But no hurry, you finish with them first. Very creative. So C.R. Snyder and his colleagues discovered that hope can be measured. The adult hope score is used to determine higher hope and lower hope individuals. And what they also found when they were studying is that hope was found to be the biggest predictor of all the character traits that we talked about earlier that describe the person who is flourishing. Once again, he found out that both children and adults with an ACE score greater than 3 had a lower hope score, and that hope can be cultivated. I included this link hopescore.com if you wanted to look up more about it. So according to C.R. Snyder, hope is an enduring pattern of thinking in relation to your life goals. So we did an exercise earlier that I asked you to really look and dream about your perfect working situation. And I asked you to write down one thing. Or maybe if you didn't write it down, you still remember what that one thing was. So what I would say that is your dream to make a goal, right? So you have this dream. Maybe my dream is that I want every baby in the NICU to do skin-to-skin care 24 hours a day. That's my dream. How am I going to get there? How are we going to find that? So hope is actually the belief that your future can be brighter and better than your past, and that you actually have a role to play. It's not just a thought, it's not just a feeling. You have a role to play in making your dreams come true, and hope is the way we can get there, okay? So hope is actually taking that dream, making a goal, and then there's two things that he named. There's agency, which could be thought of as your willpower, your motivation. And then pathways, your way power. That's how we get somewhere, right? When you think about going on a path, that's how you get there. So hope is going to begin with a goal. Agency gives you the motivation, and the pathways are the direction to get there. Once again, when you do your hope score, if you look at it, and you don't need to do this now, although you can if you want. You want to be very honest and really, don't think too much about it. Just answer the questions, and 1 being definitely false, all the way to 8 being definitely true. You add up your entire score. I believe the highest score that you can get on this is 64, and I don't think she'll mind me saying that was Mary Coughlin's score. I'm not surprised at all. And then there's your agency total and your pathway score. So that what tells us when we look at the agency is that you have a lot of willpower. You have a lot of agency. You have a lot of motivation. And then your pathway score will tell you, the higher pathway score you have, that you have really great ways to get there. You know how to find your roads to get where you need to go. And everybody's a little bit different. So what I think about when I look at this is I think, gosh, we could use this in our teamwork. We're actually going to be working a little bit with this at Caring Essentials and people that we work with. And we're going to be looking at pairing people together that maybe one person, most of us have a high hope score, although I'm not ashamed to admit that I probably have one of the lower hope scores, and believe it or not, in our group that I work with. But what I do know is that I also have an ACE score of 4. I'm not ashamed to tell you that either. And I'm also a premature baby, believe it or not. So I have lots of confounding factors, but what I've done is I've started studying and reading and cultivating and surrounding myself with people like Mary Coughlin, who has a hope score of 64. But you can pair your teams in groups that you guys can go, oh, you have a really high pathway score, you have a high agency score, we're going to put you two together and see what you guys can achieve, right? Sound good? So that's just one way you could be using that. So just a tool for you, and you could look more into it. I'd love, and I've been picking some people's brains, and if you're interested, I'd love to do some research in the NICU related to it. So the Hope Continuum, this is described in Hope Rising, which is a book written by Chan Hellman and Casey Gwynn. So when you look at this, you see that hope, we start at hope, and I'll go all the way down to apathy. So when we think about what the opposite of hope is, what's the first thing you think of? Anybody? Despair. Anybody else? So the opposite of hope being despair, and what they're saying is actually, it's not necessarily despair, because if you're despaired, right, you still have some kind of thought that there was some hope to begin with. But what he's saying, what they said in their book, is that we start with hope, and if things don't go right, and we don't have the necessary tools that we need, then it could lead to apathy, which is actually the picture of hopelessness, right? And what do you think about when you see somebody that's apathetic? Who comes to mind? Parents that have maybe lost hope? What about Barbara? We did that 30 years ago. It didn't work. That just, to me, that's what this is a picture of, right? You have your goal, you have hope, your dream, you make a goal, right? And that goal is blocked for some reason, for whatever reason. We don't have the money to buy 22 kangaroo cares or kangaroo chairs for your 24 hours a day of kangaroo care, right? We don't have that. So there's your goal is blocked. Then you go into despair, like, oh my God, but I know skin to skin is the best thing for my babies and I want it to happen 24 hours a day. I can't because guess what? I don't have the chairs to do it. Then what do? Some people might go, yep, we tried that 30 years ago. Doesn't work. And then after a while, they become apathetic and they give up. And that's what we see when we have hopelessness, okay? Makes sense? Everybody doing okay? I know it's late. So I kind of made this for myself, and I'm a very visual learner, so I like to see pictures. And I love this picture of this man, or I don't know his age, but he looks like he's dreaming and he's looking upwards, right? And he's hoping for something, he's dreaming for something. So he's got willpower, so that's his agency, like we talked about as part of the Hope Score. So what's my motivation? What am I trying to get at? I want to do 24-hour care, 24 hours of skin-to-skin care in my NICU. That's what I want, that's my goal. And I am motivated to do it because I know from attending conferences that skin-to-skin, you get a lot of bang for your buck, a lot of brain growth, a lot of bonding, a lot of breast milk, just wonderful things happening. Then I have my pathway. How am I going to get there? Well, the first thing I find out I need to do is I need to buy the chairs, right? If I'm going to do 24 hours of skin-to-skin care in my NICU and my average daily census is 25, then I need 25 chairs. Then I'm going to go to my director or finance, whoever's doing the financing, and say, I need 25 kangaroo care chairs. And I don't know if you've ever tried to buy kangaroo chairs, and I don't know if it's the same in Europe as it is in the US, but the minute you say you're buying something for the hospital, and I feel like the price is just ridiculously high, they almost make it impossible for us to get anything. So your financier is going to say, no, 25 chairs at $2,000 a piece. I don't think I can give you that money for whatever reason he decides. And then you go back. So there's your roadblock and you go back. I need to find a different way to get there. How am I going to get there? How am I going to get these 25 chairs? So I say, I could give up right now, right? I could give up? Well, guess we can't do it. Nope, can't do it. Can't get 25 chairs. I go a different pathway. Oh, maybe we'll hold a fundraiser. Maybe we'll have a fundraiser and we'll have the money donated and we'll buy the chairs that way. Do we need 25 chairs right now? Maybe we can do a little bit at a time. But I'm looking for a different pathway to get to my goal. Maybe I don't need 25 chairs right now. And then another thing that can happen with this is what if we decide, when I present it to Melinda, who's on my team, hey, you know what I decided? I decided we're gonna do kangaroo care for 24 hours a day. And Melinda might go, well, we're doing kangaroo care right now for 2 hours a day on average, and we're gonna go from 2 hours to 24 hours. Do you think that might be a little bit overachieving? Like maybe we should take it back a bit, and let's just increase our kangaroo care from 2 hours to 4 hours. And so then maybe I change my goal. But if I'm able to change my goal and go back, then maybe I can find another pathway and we can continue on. And then at the end, we reach our goal. This is a very simplified question, or example, but this is just an example I came up with in my head. You could put anything in there that you want. So then how can we help to encourage hope in ourselves? Because we need to think of that. So I wanted to kind of break this down. If I want to cultivate hope, I need to cultivate it in myself first, right? And what I've decided that's helped me is connection. That's being here. I guarantee you almost everybody in this room is going to have a high hope score. And so that connection really helps us, building the tribe, being around like-minded people, that helps us. Being authentic with who we are and being true to others around us, being vulnerable, being able to say, you know, like, I'm really nervous, my mouth is dry right now, I'm tired, you guys are tired, you know, like, but I'm going to be honest, like, this is who I am, this is where I come from, I have a low hope score, I have a high ACE score, that's who I am. So I'm going to be true to you and be honest because you're part of my tribe and I can do that, I feel safe. And then being courageous. We have to be courageous, right, to even come up with something that we want to achieve. I think it's really courageous of having those babies in the delivery room doing NICU care. I mean, oh my gosh, we all said it, but you actually have done it, and I'm so excited about that. But how can I be more courageous, and how can I take care of myself? Well, I've decided I need to take a walk, I need to spend time in meditation, and I need to pray. That's what I do for myself. What do you do for yourself? Anybody want to share? She goes to the gym, exercise. Anyone else? You can say whatever you want. Meditation for Susie. Chocolate, a little chocolate. A little bit of wine is probably okay. Anyone else? Family what? Family drives. Family drives. Talk to your mom. Oh gosh, I love that so much. And then also what I've been learning too is keeping a journal. And Mary talked about that too, like keeping a gratitude journal. That's our homework. Like thinking of 3 things in the morning and 3 things at night that we are grateful for. And that is going to make us feel more hopeful, right? So how can I support the families that I serve, that we serve, so that they have hope? How do we go from this picture on the left to the picture on the right? How do we go from that sick baby to fostering that connectedness in our moms and babies? Anybody want to speak up? Kangaroo care. The best. Anyone else? What happens if you absolutely cannot move that baby because if you do, their blood pressure is going to bottom out? What can you do? Huh? Did you hear what she said? She said, put the bed down, put mama over. I've seen that, and it's wonderful. It's not quite the same, but it's another pathway, right? I want to get that sick baby to that mom so that in the end, this is what we're looking at, right? We have this connection. So then wait, I have to talk about the elephant in the room too. How can you give somebody hope when the baby's dying and you know the baby's going to die? How do you give that person hope? And I would think Dr. Murad, because we talked about this the other day. How do we find hope to help encourage hope when a family must say goodbye to their baby? How do we do that? Ask them what they want. That's a good suggestion. So I'm going to tell you a story, if you don't mind, about hope with a family whose baby was dying. So many years ago, I was working at a big children's hospital in Southern California, and I had a mom who came in. She was an immigrant. She had fled her country because she was in an abusive relationship. And she was pregnant. And so she came into Southern California, and she was staying with a relative, I think that she didn't know real well. And she had this baby, and the baby had a form of degenerative muscular dystrophy to the point where she wasn't able to breathe on her own and was dependent on the ventilator. It was super sad. This baby's course was very, very sad. She was very sick. She couldn't swallow. We had to suction her quite often. Talk about toxic stress. She had to be suctioned. Her mom was at the bedside every day. Her mom did not speak English. I did not speak the language that she spoke, but I felt a huge connection to her. And her baby's name was Sarah. So she would come in every day to see Sarah, and we would try to do skin to skin, and sometimes it worked out real well, and she would just hold the baby. So when the decision was made that we would move on and do palliative care for her and her baby, and that the baby was going to pass away, we did have a goal in mind. So our goal in mind was that her father, who was in her country, could get to the US, to California, to see her baby and to see her before the baby passed away. So our only goal that we had was to get dad to the US and get mom and grandfather together, and so that they could have some family time before the baby passed away. This is his grandchild. Not to mention the mom really wanted her family with her. She was all alone. So I have to tell you that it was a struggle every day. It took us a while to get there, even after the decision was made that we were going to withdraw support. So this one day happens, and Sarah and her mom are in the unit, and we're working. We're in an open bay unit too. And usually when someone came into the unit, you'd get a call, like someone would call, say, hey, so-and-so's here to see this baby. Can they come in? But we didn't get a call. And I'm doing something with Sarah, and mom is nearby, and I look up and I see her face. And I look at her, and she's looking towards the doorway entrance of the pod that we're in, and her face is just so, I just see this sense of relief on her face. I cried everything, you guys, I'm sorry. So I look at her, and I look at her father who's standing in the doorway. It was priceless. I'm so sorry, it just brings me back every time. I almost didn't share this. To see her and her father and their eyes met. They weren't even touching. They were just looking at each other across the room. And she was standing by her baby. And I immediately, of course, started crying. So she looks at me and she's like, oh my gosh, Sharon, are you okay? In her little bit of broken English. Anyway, I still remember that time, and I think back to it now, and that was her hope, right? That she had this time now with her family and with her daddy, and he had time with his granddaughter before they took her off life support. So we can do that, right? We can do that when the baby's still going to pass away. There's still hope. And another example that I have is that when one of the moms that we had in our unit, the baby was diagnosed with a grade 4 IVH, and her nurse just looked at her and said, look at your baby. Just look at your baby. Spend time with him. See him. Spend that time with him. You don't need to worry about tomorrow. Let's just look at today. And that brought her so much hope, right? Because she's spending that time now with her baby. And there's hope in that, right? But just going back to my previous story, like our goal was to get her dad there, right? We did it, and our pathway was just to keep going every day, take one day at a time. We kept her suctioned, we did skin to skin, and we helped them have that time. And I will never regret it for the rest of my life. I will remember that mom, and she actually came back to thank me after the baby passed away. And I didn't do anything, you know? I was just there. She was there with her baby. So now I want to breathe for a minute. But look at, hope is a catalyst, really. Hope is what brings about change, right? Because if you see something that needs to be done and you see that there can be a better way, there's a better way, that's a catalyst for change. That dream that you had, I hope today, that you're going to say, I want to change this one thing, or something you saw here today. I'm going to change, we're going to start cube-based feedings. We're going to start swaddle bathing. That is hopeful, okay? So our goal as a collective group is to do trauma-informed care for hospitalized children and their families, right? So how are we going to get there? What's our agency? Our agency is high, right? We are motivated to do this, and we want to provide hope so that we can flourish, so that the families can flourish, and our babies can flourish. And our pathways, I would just say, not Mary's, but the core measures that were developed in 2009 are great pathways. There's hospitals now, one of them being Aberdeen. There you are. Yay for Aberdeen. In Scotland, who started instituting the core measures, and I think they just finished their pain core measure, right? They took very small steps, and now they're going to go to the next one. So you just do small steps. There's a hospital in Florida, St. Joe's, Tampa, Florida, that actually when they started going along the journey for trauma-informed care, they thought, what can we do that will be like a really quick win? And they decided they were going to start celebrating the first hold. Whatever kind of hold, it didn't matter, skin to skin. They're just going to start celebrating it, right? So kind of positive reinforcement, positive peer pressure, that's what I like to call it. And they would just take a simple Polaroid of that first hold, and they hung it up in their unit so that when you walked into the unit, you could see all these first holds. And it gave the parents who were coming into the unit with these little sick kids hope that things were going to get better. So they took those small steps, and it made a big difference. And they're well on their journey to providing trauma-informed care. So if you were here last year, you will remember that I made this mnemonic. What is hope? For me, it's helping ordinary people be extraordinary. We're all ordinary people. We get up every day. We go to work. We have a job to do. The parents come in every day after they've had this devastating news. They want to be with their baby. We are helping them do extraordinary things, right, that they never would have thought that they would be doing. So that's what I feel is hope. So I found this quote from a book I was reading by Barbara Kingsliver. It was a novel. I don't know if anybody reads novels. I know there's a lot of journal readers in here, scientific people, but I love a good book. So this quote was in that book, and I just loved it. The very least you can do in your life is figure out what you hope for. And the most you can do is live inside that hope. Not admire it from a distance, but live right in it, under its roof. Email me, call me if you have a research idea. For Hope in the NICU, please call me. Thank you.
How's everyone doing? Do we need some jazz hands? Come on, little jazz hands. Okay. I thought for the last 15 minutes, the university has put together a really interesting musical ending to our day. But for just a few minutes, I would like to invite the speakers for today to please come up to the table and just have a few minutes, about 15 minutes, of questions from you guys to our esteemed faculty. Does that sound okay? All righty, come on up, faculty. Come on, we're on the clock. And if the students that were doing the microphone, if you wouldn't mind just helping out folks, okay? And of course, simultaneously, I want you to be doing your evaluations, okay? All right, this is your shot, guys. We've got the brains of the planet here. Raise your hand for a question, and the students will bring a microphone.
This is probably, I'm Nicole from Aberdeen, and this is to primarily the medical staff. Do you think the idea of trauma-informed care is getting traction across the world, not just in your unit, but across the world, that you know of?
I think it's gaining traction in the U.S. It was actually pretty funny because I'm presenting at Gravens in a week. Some of you know that as the big developmental conference, and I entitled my my talk, Trauma-Informed Care in the NICU, Promoting Safety, Security, and Connectedness. And I was asked to change it, but the person who asked me to change it was a psychologist. And her comment to me was that although that was well accepted in mental health, she didn't think it was as well accepted other places. And I was amused because I speak about trauma-informed care constantly, so I don't know what your experience, Iris, is in Israel and Thomas in Germany.
I agree. I think it's spreading. I think one of the examples is that we used some slides. We used the same slides, the same ideas, so they are spreading, and we are using them, and we are empowering other people, and we should continue to fight for our beliefs and our thoughts.
In Germany, but we have the same content, and our goal is to have a psychologist on every NICU actually, and we are working hard on it, and most of them cover with psychologists, so they are only there to support parents, support the staff, so I believe it's a good idea.
I have a question for Melinda. So I'm a more seasoned nurse, and some of the newer, I've forgotten some of the how you feel as a new nurse when you're really task-oriented. So how did you, as a newer nurse, switch so quickly to being not so task-oriented and being more looking at the big picture and looking at outcomes? And what's a suggestion to help some of our nurses that are new in the unit also make that transition?
Oh, yeah. Just turned off. There it goes.
Oh, look at that. We're figuring it out as we go. So for me personally, I was, how do we say? I'm sure everybody has heard the theme of our veteran nurses eat our young, right? Trial by fire. I will say that this kind of person here kind of threw me into the deep end a little bit. In a good way, I'm getting there. In a good way, saying you're capable. So I would say for me, once I had like my first year or so under my belt when you're absolutely terrified, and you really do realize the impact that you make on these babies, and you're afraid of what the recognition basically that you're giving that you don't know what you don't know. The realization in your first year. I think after that was the moment that I started to feel like, okay, I kind of have some bearing to it, and I had people around me to encourage me. So I didn't do that on my own, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I had a tribe around me from the very beginning that encouraged me to own my own truth and to live my truth and to live in my authenticity and to run with that. And I will say and will encourage people, don't eat your young. It's the worst thing that we can do to our team is to eat your young. Encourage your young, take them under your wing and allow them to flourish, kind of like we're expecting our families to. Our families can't flourish if we don't, right? So who are the first people when you start a change that are the easiest to adapt to it? We're gonna do a heel stick, skin to skin. Is it the veteran nurses that are eager to jump in there and do it? No, ma'am. Right, because our back hurts. So I just say, for me, it wasn't an easy click. For me, it was very much, I was lucky and blessed enough to have a tribe of people that believed in me. So be that tribe for the people around you. Don't eat your young, is what I would say.
As I understand, trauma-informed care is a concept, but at the same time, there are many facets to it.
So like means do you have any like technical resource where you can make accountable to all the facets, so that we don't practice only one aspect and we are aware of all the aspects?
So just so I understand, so you're asking about all of the facets of trauma-informed care?
Yeah.
So for me, I think that there's an operational aspect of the concept, right? And then there are kind of these pillars of the concept. The concept itself is well grounded in behavioral health, and so for us to not look at that is silly. So I've examined what behavioral health has really modeled for us. They've created a lot of great resources. And some of the core tenets of a trauma-informed approach is about safety, collaboration, choice, empowerment, and trustworthiness. And those are kind of these principles that can transcend how we move through our work. The operational strategy, and I think of the core measures, right? Managing pain, protecting sleep, supporting posture, having wonderful eating experiences, all those kinds of things are realized under this larger framework of creating safety. What does safety in bathing an infant look like? What does trustworthiness look like in an infant-family encounter? And really building it that way. Because it's not, right? It's not, oh, do this. And it's not a lot more of doing either. It's not just the tasks on the checklist is not trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care is you being present and breathing your authenticity, your love, your compassion into that exchange. Whether that exchange lasts a second, an hour, or an entire hospital stay. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I was talking in context of my project, you know about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So in that context, what I was thinking, definitely it's a concept, definitely there are personal characteristics which are very important, but at the same time, it boils down to the task. It might be pain, it might be sleep, it might be posture, it might be all the things. So basically, we have to have some system which is making you or entire team accountable for each and every action.
Yes, but it's bigger than the action, right? It's bigger than the doing. I mean, I love your project. I think it's brilliant, and you've created a platform that really makes it more, makes it easier for clinicians to go through the assessment process, right, and identify what the patient needs. But you do that, and this is where it gets intangible, and I think where we can lose people. But as role models, we have a responsibility to keep people connected to the soul of why they're doing this. What part of this assessment, is informing you about a bigger need for this infant? Not just call PT, or call OT, but something else. So it's a challenge, I think, to kind of articulate that aspect, at least for me.
If I could elaborate on that just for a moment. Trauma-informed care is not an intervention. It is a philosophy of care. And I think that as a combined group of healthcare providers and people who care about the well-being in families, we need to take safety back from people like Joint Commission. That's in the United States, who defines sort of what the philosophy of care is. We need to make people understand that safety is precisely what Mary is talking about. It is to keep people safe in the larger sense of the word.
And one thing I think, Dr. Sanders, that you talked about, and Iris too, the way we do that is we keep the parents involved. It's not how skilled I become either at the procedure or the relationship. It is about empowering those parents to be that always present, always loving caregiver that child expects and knows and needs. And so that, I feel like, is where it comes from. And it's not so much what we learn to do, or yes, we mentor and we we facilitate, but what we need to be facilitating is that dyad and that family.
Because their
and
journey
kinda get
doesn't
out of
stop
the
there,
way.
right? Yeah.
Sometimes we get out of the way and it just kind of happens naturally.
Yeah, thank you so much. Excellent.
I think that that's like the greatest point. And I have to say, again, coming from the parental standpoint, which is sometimes hard for me to take caps on and off, and my brain gets so excited. But what I forgot to say during my talk is that this NICU journey does not end at discharge. Yay, they went home with no oxygen. Great job, team, right? Really, that's a great outcome. But what does their outcome look like in 3 years? Is that mother bonded to their child? How many difficult preemies do we have that really you have to know their cues really well to feed them, or to know, that this is their awake time of the night? And if their mom doesn't know them, they then have to take this baby home. And what good have we done for that family to send a baby home with them that they don't know? So it's a different thought process. It's more of a way of being. It's respecting the family and the care that we do on a completely different level. It's definitely not task-oriented. It's more of a holistic approach.
I have the mic. I actually had a question for you. A couple things. One, if you're not calling it trauma-informed care, are you calling it developmentally supportive care? Because I've met with the same kind of concern that there is, and read the article about kind of that resistance to acknowledge that there is trauma, and I think that's a real thing that we will come up as a question with our colleagues on not wanting to own that. And so I was just curious if that was what your story is.
I believe that there's not so many research going on in Germany regarding to trauma-informed care. So more and more units try to do developmental care, family integrating care, but the topic trauma-informed care is not very common in my country, actually. I miss that, so that's why I'm here also. But and we have to follow the steps from Mary, I think, more and more of us.
And then my other question was, did you find that with doing the skin-to-skin right in the delivery room, that then the skin-to-skin, I don't know if you studied this, the skin-to-skin rates overall in terms of frequency and length of time held skin-to-skin maintained? I found that even with like maybe a small baby unit where the skin-to-skin up front is very good and very consistent, often will dwindle. There's a period of time kind of there, maybe a little bit before pre-feeding and then getting into pre-feeding, where it seems like skin-to-skin is dwindling and not done as frequently, and maybe we just say, oh, they're a 36-weeker, we don't need to do that or focus on that. Have you found anything like that?
I have the same problem in my hospital. So the intensive care unit is doing a very good job. We're starting skin-to-skin right in the DR, and we continue it through the whole stay. But we transfer the babies mostly with the weight around 1 kilogram or 1.2 kilograms down to the follow-up unit. And there's a completely different strategy. So 2 teams, 2 different approaches. Oh, your baby's in a heated bed now, dressed. There's no need for skin-to-skin care anymore. Be happy because it's the first step to be in school. So that's not true. That's not the goal, because it's a 32-weeker. It's 8 weeks before the term, and I always explain to the parents, we have a lot of rooming in facilities. You stay here 24/7. Your baby. There is no more workload for the nurse because we have a lack of nurses. You're doing your job alone. Undress your baby, take it into your bed, skin to skin, as often as you want. But it's a philosophical question. If the nurse is teaching mother, oh, he's a big baby now. Look, he's dressed. There's no need. So I think anywhere, it's always the same, yeah?
Natasha, do you mind passing it back?
This is a question for you, Iris. When you're implementing the quality feeding within your NICU and supporting...
Bring the mic closer.
Sorry. When you're implementing the quality feeding within your NICU and supporting parents, observing their infants' cues, he had a slide around supporting parents' knowledge. Was that within one-to-one sessions with the family or group, just to build parental relationships with other parents in the NICU, support networks, or and with the videos, was that specific videos of their babies, cues, supporting parents' understanding, or was that just videos you collected?
So the study took place in a very traditional unit, which didn't allow any flexibility. So during the study period, it was one-on-one. And these parents had to be supported frequently because everyone was against it. 8 months ago, I moved to a different unit where I became the director of the unit. And this was, I think, the first change that I've done because I cannot see it differently. It was implemented immediately, very quickly by most of the nurses. Like every new strategy or new thing, people have ideas. So new ideas came into, or new interpretation came into this philosophy. And in order to create something that was more homogeneous, so we have lactation consultant and oral therapist and occupational therapist, we sat together, we decided how this philosophy would be implemented in this unit. And they are working with the nurses, with the parents. I don't like the word working, but they are sharing the philosophy with the nurses, with the parents. And now the whole unit, it was implemented by everyone very quickly. We have a very unique unit because the parents, the physician and the nurses are egoless. There are no egos in this place. People are really modest and are working with a lot of love to their patient. I think this is something which is special to small units. And everyone is very open-minded. So we are already 8 months there. Our census of patients went down from 55 before I came, then quickly to less than 40, and now we're staying at less than 30 because babies are going on quickly. They are healthy.
Can I just
she wants one follow-up. Go ahead.
And with parental increase in knowledge, did you find parents stayed on the unit to feed their infants? I just struggle with, and we work in Qatar and we don't have a lot of parental presence, and a lot of it is down to supporting parental knowledge and medical literacy. Did that support?
So I believe that we have to empower parents from the first minute. We cannot first tell them your baby is going to die, don't touch, don't be here, don't do, don't that. We have, once a baby is born, we cannot do it in the delivery room. If I'll do that, they will kill me, it's too early. It's a new idea, but it's, even our delivery room still has to go through transformation. But once the incubator arrives and the baby is in the unit, we take the father's hand. Usually the mother is not there. We put them there. We tell them without words, don't be afraid, this is yours. And it's not so fragile. So from the first minute, we do it. And we recognize there are certain groups which are more likely not to come. So with these groups, we have now also psychologists in the unit. So these groups, we are doing modifications in order to bond them from the first minute. And if sometimes it's needed, I shout on the parents.
I've got Janine over here with a question.
So you pretty much addressed what the question was I was going to ask, but I wanted to at least just make a statement of acknowledgement and thank you. I think approaching almost 40 years of doing this, a part of me at my core feels exhausted, and part of me also feels very energized to see on the planet the things that are actually finally happening. And to the point of trauma-informed care versus developmentally supportive care, I think part of it comes down to us taking care of ourselves as staff. Coming from a parent and a professional in the NICU, it's giving ourselves permission, thank you, Dr. Morag, as staff to be able to step outside of the way of being that we've been doing for decades into permission to do something in a new and better way that is developmentally supportive, because it's ultimately about the trauma that's being experienced by the babies, the families, and the staff. And so thank you all for sharing your moments of glory in our work collectively. in how we've gotten together, because it's not about therapists doing something or nurses doing something or physicians doing something. We are a team, and when we work together, things happen. So thank you.
I want to comment on it. Thank you for saying it. I often hear from our nurses the sorrow of not being allowed to do things before and the pain of what they've done until now. And sometimes they really cry when we're talking about it, and it's something that we have to be mindful and to acknowledge and to respect. People were not allowed to think or to do differently for many years.
Could I just make a comment from the very first question about whether it's getting traction as trauma-informed care? And coming from Qatar with people from all over the world there, from Philippine people to East Indians, Jordan, Oman, UAE, Pakistani, East Indian. Trauma-informed care is not a word that they're familiar with. And so when Natasha and I were coming and telling our staff, whether it's the neonatologists or nurses, totally unfamiliar and relatively unfamiliar to us. And I think there's lots of takeaways from this experience so far to take back. But we invite you to come to the Middle East and help to inform everyone there. There's certainly an idea of the developmental care, the family-centered care, people from the UK bringing Bliss, people from the US bringing, and Europe bringing some of the NIDCAP. But you know, integrating it, and for me, taking it to the level of trauma, which Mary and I have had some conversation and Sharon about, is that trauma in and of itself has an impact on brain development and white matter kinds of changes and things like that, which I think is really important for at least our neonatologists to hear, because they're very involved in the injury to the brain related to bleeds or HIE or that sort of thing, but not so much trauma in and of itself. And we really do have a problem with the nanny culture, as we talked about in Qatar, where even as babies grow and leave the NICU and/or are born full term and leave the nursery, they are not parented by their parents. They're parented by nannies of all different languages, of all different cultures, and it's an extremely different environment. So I'm kind of at a loss of how to engage the family in this. And I'm also just going to, from my U.S. background, we have so many parents that can't be at the nursery because they're working, because they're this, you know, unavailable. So it almost seems like we assume that the parents are all here and ready to do kangaroo care for 23 hours. And I am very curious how you all manage that, and their siblings, and the things they have to take care of at home. So I hadn't heard anything about all that today, and I'd be curious at another point.
I mean, I think there's lots of different challenges from a socioeconomic perspective, cultural perspectives, that there's no one-size-fits-all, right? I think, definitely bringing the principles and the science behind, this movement, gradually, certainly doing advocacy at the unit level, but also, in the U.S., we have to do advocacy at, the organizational level, the systems level, and even at the government level. So it's a long process, and that's why it's so important that you guys are here, that you're joining this movement, that this concept resonates with you, that you see the purpose behind it, that you're looking to create a legacy that really, is going to bring you a sense of pride and accomplishment in the work that you do. We're honored that you've joined us on this journey. So, and we look to you as well as amongst ourselves to find those answers, to look for those pathways. It's going to take a while, but we can do this together. We've got courage, right, guys? We've got compassion, right? And that gives us hope, right? Thank you guys so much. I'm going to turn it over to our hosts for our lovely closing ceremony. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I saw in the slides that there were two twins, and mom was doing skin to skin, and mom was like sleeping on the bed. So the NICU, our NICU has only the babies. The parents are like in the mother baby unit, or And then the other thing is like we don't let the babies on the oscillator like do skin to skin. We haven't started yet, And then the other things, when the babies are born, do you guys stabilize the baby and then do skin to skin, or if they are on a CPAP, if they are not stable, then you don't let them do skin to skin?
The video I showed you was made in the delivery room. So it was a C-section, and during the stabilization of the mother, closing the surgery, finishing the surgery, we stabilized the twins. Both takes approximately 45 minutes, and after that period, the mother is supervised for an additional 1 hour in the DR for security reasons. Every mother get that. And during that time, we do the kangaroo care, the skin to skin. That's why she was in the bed. Yeah. In my NICU, there's normally not enough space to bring adult beds right into the rooms. It's in most of the cases that way. So we have kangaroo chairs. Yeah. And there's no restriction on kangaroo care, even if the baby is ventilated. The only condition is it has to be stable enough, and the mother has to be healthy and stable enough to sit there for an hour at least, or probably longer. That is the only concern. Yeah.
Pardon? Oh, go ahead. Did you have something to say?
Oh, I think my comment was meant for Constance and Natasha. You know, the barriers in the United States are overwhelming. The best outcomes in the world are in the Scandinavian countries, and they are the countries that guarantee parents a prolonged maternity and or paternity leave, right, for up to a year combined. But my second comment to you, Constance, was, well, if the parents won't come, bring the nannies in. Remember, it doesn't have to be a parent. We prefer in Western culture that it is a parent. It can be a nanny, it can be a grandparent, it can be an aunt, it can be an uncle. Yeah. So it sounds like you have some cultural barriers potentially there, but I would say bring the nanny in.
There you go.
It's not allowed. Oh, well, there you go.
There's
There's your,
opportunity
there's
for
your
change.
starting point.
There's an opportunity.
There's
could
your
I
hope.
also just share with everyone to just reach into your little gift bag. You've got a lovely little Courage bracelet in there. These bracelets were made by women in underdeveloped countries as a means to really empower them and really establish some financial freedom for themselves and for their families, a really noble cause. So I hope you enjoy these Courage bracelets and you wear them proudly. Don't forget your evals. Thank you.
3 minutes? Just for our guests, every university in Portugal has a group that is called a tuner that sings traditional songs. This is a typical tradition song and some critic songs. Not all of them could be present because some of them are on their clinics, but thank you for coming, and they are going to sing some more songs for you today. The instruments, some of them are also tradition, Portuguese instruments, so enjoy. Já entregaram todos? Before you leave, if you have one of these, please leave it here. Okay? Thank you. We'll give you one back tomorrow. Excuse me? Put